The interesting thing was that with one of the the ones that got more of the attention, I first met him in the United States, and he came to India, and he was very troubled. His girlfriend and he had broken up, and he was very distraught. And he lived with a group of us in the mountains for a while, and I felt very protective of him, and I so wanted him to meet Maharaji, and I brought him to Maharaji, and Maharaji completely ignored him. And I got very upset. I was so wanted Maharaji to give this guy a hit of some sort. And I kept pushing this fellow forward and bringing attention to him, and Maharaji kept ignoring him for days. Later, he became Maharaji's close confidant and companion, and I got to hate him. I mean, I'm just sharing the truth. I don't know what the meaning of it is. Because Maharaji would throw him out, like the rest of us, and we'd all leave, and he would just walk around the back of the building, pick a flower off a tree, come in as if he were coming for the first time, give it to Maharaji, and Maharaji would welcome him with open arms. I mean, con men shouldn't win. Maharaji, he could see right through people so easily. And he knew so much, and I always wanted him to be that wonderful, miraculous, loving being. And once I had a friend come from Canada, professor, and I brought him to Maharaji, and I really wanted Maharaji to snow him, because the guy was kind of a scientist. And I thought, well, you know, very rarely do scientists get a hit of miracles. They just read about them and then they remain skeptical. But I thought if he gets a real hit himself, that'll change science in the West. So I pushed him forward. Maharaji looked at him and he said, "You're from the United States?" And the man says, "No, I'm from Canada." "You have sisters?" "No, I'm an only child." And Maharaji just categorically made error after error after error, and very slowly this guy started to look at me like, you know, you got a very nice guru here, you know, this is lovely, this is just what I expected. And the minute the guy left, Maharaji told all about his history and his life story. And once in Delhi, the very officious-looking Indian lady came who was very haughty, and she said, "Maharaji, it's so nice to see you again. It's been so long." And Maharaji, and she really was trying to impress everybody. Maharaji said, "Kya? Who are you?" "What? Maharaji, you remember you were at my home?" "Kya?" And he acted like this kind of dull, stupid, and finally she just left in disgust, and then he described her father and her grandfather and her whole story. One of the most extraordinary stories that happened to me, and of course those of you that know the book Miracle of Love recognize these, but when I first wrote Be Here Now, and I brought him a copy, and it disappeared into the back of the building I didn't see it for 3 months. And then he came out one day and he called me up and he said, "You're printing lies in your book." I said, "No, Maharaji, everything in that book's true." I thought he was going to say lies about him. He says, "Nay." And when I got to India in 1967, I saw Maharaji maybe 3 or 4 times that whole winter. That was it. And most of the time I was being trained by somebody named Haridas Baba, who now lives in California. Haridas was a very pukka sadhu. He was a very good sadhu, a Raja yogi. Very good yogi. And he taught me all kinds of yogic techniques. And right after I left India in that spring, Maharaji and Haridas broke apart. Haridas had been serving Maharaji for 12 years. And a lot of bitterness ensued, and one never understands what all these games are about, really. I have no idea what it was about. But I got as if my father and mother had been divorced. And I got very protective of both of them. And I ended up arranging for Haridas to come to America. And he was supposed to be here on a 4-month visa. So I paid his ticket to America, and he came to America, and it just happened that as he came to America, I went back to India. So I was with Maharaji, and Maharaji was kidding me relentlessly about sending Haridas to America. Like, sort of, you sided with your mother, did you? It's that sort of thing. Then he said to me, all right, you've taken Haridas to America, keep him there. Keep him there for 5 years. I said, Maharaji, I can't do that. He's only got a 4-month visa, and a tourist visa and an alien visa are very different matters. You can bring somebody for 4 months. To bring them for 5 years is a whole other ballgame. I said, Maharaji, I can't do that. He said, Bhagwan Das is over here in India. I've kept him here for 7 years. You can keep him for 5 years in America, Haridas. I said, Maharaji, I can't do that. He said, you just do it. So I went back from the temple that day to the hotel. And the day before, 2 fellows had come through, Westerners, sort of hippie-ish types. And I had brought them to see Maharaji, and they had come, they were looking for me, and I took them to see Maharaji, and then we were hanging out at the hotel, and they were leaving the next day. And one of them said, is there anything I can do for you? I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I'm a pot lawyer in L.A. I said, well, gee, I don't know anybody that's been busted that needs your services at the moment, but that's very nice. I said, actually, I don't have any legal problems. The only problem I have is that Maharaji told me to get a visa for Haridas for 5 years, and I don't know how to do that. He says, gee, that's no problem at all. My brother-in-law is head of immigration for the whole western states. I'll take care of it with a letter. So he wrote a letter, the file got flagged, Haridas went flying through and got the thing. Now you could say, isn't that interesting how those things happen? So he called me up and he said to me, you're printing lies in your book. And I said, no, I'm not. He said, look, you say here that Haridas built this temple. I said, well, I thought he did. So he calls a man over who's waiting in the wings. He says, who are you, Maharaji? You know who I am. I build all your temples. Did you build that temple? Of course. Did Haridas build it? No, he helped pour some concrete. Oh. One lie. He said, you say here that Haridas went into the jungle when he was 5 years old. I said, well, I understood that he did. Calls over a man. He says, who are you, Maharaji? You know who I am. I'm head of the forestry department. Do you know Haridas? Yes, he worked for me as a clerk until 1962. Oh, he went into the jungle when he was 5, did he? And he had a third one. And they were all on 2 pages of the book. Like 2 pages on 2 sides of a page of a book. So he looked at me after he told me that. He says, well, what are you going to do about this? I hadn't thought of doing anything about it. I figured, you know, they're very trivial matters that only people in India could care about. Nobody in the West will know that Maharaji, you know, that, so I wasn't going to do anything. But I saw, obviously, I was supposed to do something about it. So I said, well, Maharaji, we're printing the next edition of the book. I'll have it changed in the next edition. He said, you do that. So I wrote to New Mexico, to the Lama Foundation, where the book was being published. And the book was being printed in Albuquerque, which is about 130 miles or so south of the Lama Foundation. And I wrote and I said to them, in the next printing, in the next 30,000 you print, would you take out this one page, because this page doesn't have everything in it straight. Now, by this time, Haridas, at my suggestion, was a guest at the Lama Foundation, and they all loved him very dearly. So they weren't too eager to do this. They figured it was just a squabble between Haridas and Maharaji. So I got a letter back saying they didn't see why they should do this. But they said, at any rate, Stephen said, we were down in Albuquerque. This is Steve Durkee, who was helping publish it. He said, well, I was down in Albuquerque, and I cleared the book for the next printing, and they put it on the web press, which is a huge press that prints the whole book all at once. And it binds it, does everything. And he said, and then I left Albuquerque, and I was on the road for 2 days, and I got back here, and there was your letter. So it's too late for this 30,000, but I'll change it in the next printing, if you insist. So I picked that letter up very early in the morning, and I got on the bus, and I went out to the temple with the letter in my jola, in my shoulder bag. Walked into the temple. Maharaji screaming at me, what does the letter say? What does the letter say? You know, obviously, if he knows there's a letter, he knows what it says. And it's one of those kind of things where he's constantly kind of playing with you. I said, well, Maharaji, it says that it's already printed, but we will change it in the next printing. Can't change it now. These are all printed. He says, change it now. I said, well, Maharaji, 30,000 books, that's like $10,000. That's like 80,000 rupees, Maharaji. We got to throw away 80,000 rupees. He says, change it now. Money and truth have nothing to do with one another. He said, before you didn't know those things were not true, there was no karma. Once you know and you print lies, there is karma. Change it now. Get out. So in those days, I was not using money because he said I shouldn't touch money, and usually I was counting on somebody to pay my bus fare. But all those people were staying at the temple, and I was all alone out on the road suddenly. So I hitchhiked in an army truck, and I went back to the town, and I got the people at the hotel to send a cable for me. And I sent a cable to Lama saying, forget the expenses. It's Maharaji's book, and he says change it now. Throw out all the copies, do whatever you have to do, but change it now. I got a letter back about 10 days later saying the strangest thing happened. Your cable arrived just as a letter arrived from the printer. It appeared that when he put the job on the press, one of the plates was missing. And so he went into the files to get the original of that plate. And the original was missing. Every other page was there and every other plate was there. The page that was missing was a picture of Maharaji. Since he wouldn't know what to do, he took the whole job off the press and didn't run it. And he was waiting for further instructions. So the cost of a telephone call instead of $10,000. When I went back to Maharaji, he just ignored me completely when I tried to tell him about it. He didn't want to hear about it at all. He didn't know from nothing. But I sure learned something about money and truth. Here are a few of the things that Maharaji said specifically to me. And you can see that most of them I'm not doing. And that's part of the way in which I am with Maharaji. Because Maharaji knows my heart, and my love for him is very deep. And he's taught me to trust my own intuition. At one point, I was teaching at Esalen, and Claudio Naranjo and John Bleibtreu and John Lilly and a whole group of people were there, and they all were going down to study with Oscar Ichazo, Arica, the Arica group, down in Chile. And they said to me, they talked to me about this incredible guy in Chile who was a great master, great Sufi master. And they said that I should come down and study with them. And I sort of wanted to go. But I really didn't know clearly, and I thought, I'll ask Maharaji. I never thought of asking him anything by letter before, but this seemed like a big enough thing, so I wrote to India to a friend, KK, and I said, would you ask Maharaji whether I should study with a Sufi down in Chile? A letter came back saying, Maharaji said that if you want to, you should. The minute I got that letter, I didn't want to anymore. All right? And I didn't. I don't know why, but I didn't want to. The minute I got that permission, I didn't want to go. 6 months later, I was in India, and I said to KK, isn't it strange the way that happened? You sent the letter back saying that it was okay, and I didn't want to go. And he said, well, I didn't tell you the whole thing in the letter. He said, when I brought the letter to Maharaji, asking him whether you should study, he said, why would Ram Dass want to do a thing like that? No, don't tell him that. Tell him he can study with that person if he wants to. And what had been transmitted through the letter was the other quality of the answer, not the words themselves. He said, there'll come a time when you'll not want to lecture anymore. Then you'll know God. And we're waiting. He said, give up anger and love everyone. He said, be like Gandhi. I said, I'd like to. One winter, I decided to spend the winter in the hotel, and I got all cuddly in a beautiful room, and I got my little tea cooker and all my books in and warm quilts, and I was just going to hole up in my cave. And I got a message from Maharaji saying, Ram Dass should not stay there. He said, Ram Dass should not stay in one place so long. He can come back. But he said, a yogi is like water. If it stays too long in one place, it gets stale.